all my friends love their smokers and all of these things, but
Yes.
anything smoked is not good for you, period. Let's be honest. But also, it produces what's called HCAs and PAHs, which are these carcinogenic compounds. And they're formed when you cook meat at high temperatures. So we're exposing ourselves to these carcinogenic compounds, these AGEs, advanced glycogen end products. And they are found when you cook meat at high temperatures.
Today, we're confronting a dilemma many parents face: how to incorporate more plants into our family's meals, and which ones truly enhance overall well being. If mealtime tensions or uncertainty about healthy eating ring a bell, you're in good company. Our guest, Alisia Essig, a holistic plant-based nutritionist, embraced a plant-centric lifestyle following her husband's stroke at 37. She'll uncover why conventional diets may be missing the mark and introduce targeted plant pairings that can reshape your family's wellness. Envision improved digestion, better cardiovascular health, and abundant energy effortlessly. Imagine if the solution to your family's well-being was more straightforward than you'd guessed. We're exposing the overlooked shortcomings of typical diets, the unexpected plant pairings that could redefine your health, and simple strategies you can implement this evening. So stick around, your next meal could fortify a healthier future. Good afternoon, Allie. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad I found you online because, like in this whole carnivore everyone's talking about, and you kind of have this opposite, I want to, well, not opposite, but your 90-10 approach that we'll get into later. I speak with a lot of people about this, and I am hearing the carnivore side coming from the biohacking crowd and people in that realm. But when I break it down, more parents and families, and I do hear more of this plant-based initiative that they're sort of leaning to.
Yeah, of course. There's so much. Obviously, anyone can go down a pigeonhole, but I just like to bring more like realistic, real day application to how do you eat a healthy diet?
Absolutely, absolutely. And starting off the top, your husband, 37 years old, had a stroke. You lost your father at 55, heart attack. Obviously, both traumatic events, but also wake-up calls, I would imagine, to you personally, obviously your husband. How those events maybe pointed out maybe conventional diets are just not for you. Like, we're told to eat these heavy proteins or red meats and things like that. How did these two events shape what you're doing today?
So I'm a Pilates instructor, and so before any of these things happened, I was always interested in health and fitness in general. I think when you're teaching fitness classes, everyone asks you, okay, well, give me some advice. And so I always loved studying and learning. And I had back in 2019, I just had twin babies, and they were number 5 and number 6. I have 6 kids. So we and when you're pregnant with twins, your body does what it needs to do. And I gained a lot of weight, and my husband gained the twin baby weight right along with me. So we were trying to lose the twin baby weight, both of us. And we went on what we thought was considered a healthy diet on the typical, higher protein, macro based diet. And it was working. We were both losing weight. So there was no reason for us to think that this wasn't how we should be eating the rest of our lives. Except for on October 1st, 2019, when I found myself rushing into the ER, scanning the room after getting a phone call from my husband's coworkers that he was in the ER. And we weren't sure what was going on. But when I looked over and scanned the room, I saw him slumped over in a wheelchair. He looked like he was 80 years old. Half of his face was slanted. And I knew in my heart that he was having a stroke. But it took doctors hours and days even really to do all the testing to see exactly what was going on. And it was confirmed that yes, it was a stroke, that it was affecting his vision. He was having double vision, and that from here on out, we would have to follow a heart healthy diet, which is like, okay, but I thought that's what we were doing. I thought we were eating something that was healthy. I thought this is what everyone told us to do to lose weight. And doesn't that, if it was helping you lose weight, doesn't that mean that it's heart healthy? And that's where, I really had to dive deeper into the research to find out what's going to support my husband. Because my dad did have a heart attack when he was 55 years old, and he didn't get a warning. It was his one and only heart attack. There was no warning heart attacks. It was just one and done, and he was gone. And so with my husband, I took it probably a lot more seriously than maybe others would have, because I didn't want to turn into my mom or her mom, who also lost her husband to, again, things like very similar. He was a smoker and so had a very similar type of experience. And so it's like, if this is something that's in my control, I want to be able to make changes that I can make instead of just let society dictate what we eat and how our future ends up being.
So you're here with your husband, you're in the hospital. What's the first thing that comes to mind in the sense of when you decide, okay, what we're doing is not working? And again, you thought it was working because of that's what the weight loss and all that kind of stuff that went along with it. But what was the trigger to sort of really dive into what you were eating and how to change it?
Well, we had to run multiple tests. Part of it is like, was this just a hole in his heart? Is this just a heart arrhythmia? Is this genetic history? And once all of those kind of dominoes were knocked down, that no, 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 it's not a hole in his heart. No, it's not genetic history. It's like, well, why? Why in the world would someone who's just 37 years old be suffering a stroke? And what does a heart healthy diet mean? And so we sat down with the dietitian and she gave us a piece of paper that said, from here on out, you need to avoid trans fats. I'm like, I don't even know what those are. Saturated fats. I'm like, I know I've heard that, but I have no idea what foods those are in. Cholesterol. I'm like, oh, eggs. I remember cholesterol and eggs, and then eat more fiber. And all I thought of in the moment was like, wait, fiber one bars? Do I just buy
Right.
eat
Getting
fiber
bars, yeah.
right? It's so confusing. And obviously no alcohol. That's a big part of it too. But it felt like I had to interpret this. I'm like, well, what do I make for dinner? Like, that's what I really want to know. And is this the right research? Is this, you hear all these people talking about cholesterol doesn't matter. And so I'm like, what does matter and how does it affect stroke and why? I was I got really obsessed with this that I would lay in bed at night and be like, what exactly was going on inside my husband's arteries that led to a clot, that led to a stroke? Let's go back. How does this even happen? And really trying to understand that. And that's where, okay, now what foods cause this to happen and what foods prevent this and what foods will help my husband get his vision back? Because at this time, when you have a stroke, it affects you. This is not just like oh, now I'm all better. Like, that's more of an ischemic stroke. But this, for my husband, it was a full blown, he had consequences that he had to struggle with. He couldn't drive. He struggled working. So we had to really not only pray and do everything that we could spiritually, but also like physically, what can I do to increase his chances to help his arteries heal?
Now, was the the dinner component of changing the diet also encompassing the kids too? Because you don't want them, obviously, God forbid, to go down the same path as your husband. So are you taking into account how to change it for obviously the two of you, but for them as well?
Yeah, because no mom wants to be making two meals. Let's be honest.
Of
No mom.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
That's terrible. It's like
Yeah.
stressful enough just to make dinner every night, and then to make two, that sounds terrible. And so, of course, I wanted to be able to do this in a way that my kids would eat dinner. They didn't have to love it. I just wanted them to eat it. And if not, I realized, okay, look, even before we went more plant-based, my kids weren't eating every single dinner that I made. And so at least if they didn't like what I was eating, that they could just grab something from the fridge and, make themselves a sandwich, whatever. But I needed to make this easy. I needed to make this simple. Remember, I had twin babies
Hmm.
at home. They were only 8 months old. And so there was a lot going on with not only my twins, but also with my four other children. And so it's like, how can I make this as simple and easy as possible and without the overwhelm? Because we were already overwhelmed with having to go to all the doctor's appointments and having to, adjust our whole lives around this health event.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is parents are looking for a lot of simple, actionable steps that they can take to make things easy, especially with a family of your size. Of course, the average person is probably not there. Maybe, what is it, 2.3 kids or something per household or something, and you're like almost triple. That's definitely a lot going on, especially with the age of the children. Obviously, we're not talking about the two twins, but in terms of the kids, the older kids eating as well. So when they gave you the advice of heart healthy diet, and I'm assuming you went to an RD or just a dietitian or whatever it might be, was it more working with them that kind of led you down the path, or was it here are some basic guidelines, and then from there, your own research kind of led you to sort of craft your own weekly plan, if that is fair to say?
100%. She gave us the guidelines, which were confusing, but at least they were guidelines.
Sure.
Okay, saturated
The
fat,
fiber.
cholesterol, it was something. Like that piece of paper was very helpful. It was a 15, 20-minute meeting with the dietitian. I mean, something so fast. And had someone not been passionate about it, I think this would have been a piece of paper that just got piled on with all the other piece of papers that they got and nothing would have changed. There was something inside of my soul that was like, no, I'm a mama bear. I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight for this and make sure that we get my husband as long as we possibly can. Like I have a lot of power. I'm not powerless. We're not victims in this situation. And I can choose what I'm making for dinner and I can make it so that it's yummy and it's delicious. And I think that's where anyone can make an unhealthy meal taste good. Like it's really not hard to put a lot of cheese on something, put a lot of cream in it, it's going to be good. And so it did require some creativity and some skill on my part, but I started with what we knew. I'm like, okay, we really like this cashew chicken recipe and it's one of our go-tos. Okay, well, how can I make this more heart healthy? Well, I know that beans are super important. And again, remember, we just been eating this high protein diet. So I was like, I'm not even going to think about protein anymore because that didn't get us to where we need to be right now. I'm just going to think about heart health. And now I do try to add a little bit more protein in my meals. But at that time, I think it's easiest for everyone just to don't stress about protein at the beginning,
Yeah.
unless you're bodybuilding, just don't stress about it, but have a protein source. And it's okay, especially at the beginning, if that protein source is beans. And so I was like, okay, so instead of chicken, I'm going to do this with chickpeas because I know beans are incredibly heart healthy. They have antioxidants, they have fiber. It's not the fiber one bars, right? They come from plants. Fiber comes from plants. So I need to add as many plants as possible to his diet. He needs as many antioxidants to help, with the oxidation that was going on to help his brain heal. And so we just started by making those simple swaps. If it had chicken, I would make chickpeas. If it had, ground beef, I would try to do black beans. Like we started a lot with Mexican. Everyone loves Mexican food.
Yeah.
We liked black beans anyway. And so it was really easy to just be like, okay, we're going to do tacos. And instead of ground beef, we're just going to do black beans. And make, refried black beans. And it's super yummy. And my family loved it because it wasn't much different from where we were. I just kind of cut out the meat and I kept all my meat. In fact, I was planning on still using it and I was surprised how easy it was to transition. And I started enjoying it because it was faster. I was cooking meals in like half the time because I'm just opening up a can, instead of having to cook the meat. It really did go a lot faster.
So it's just these simple swaps and keeping the idea of mind of, okay, I like this recipe, but just swap out what the red meat is for the bean kind of thing. Did you get into the research about what the previous diet you were on and how it's affecting people? How people may not know, but they're eating these diets that, again, you and your husband were on, and he fell, susceptible to the being on that diet too long, I'm assuming. What did you discover that people are maybe being affected by that they don't realize by having these protein-heavy diets?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that surprised me is that people don't realize, and even though my husband had a stroke, I do feel like it fits with so many different types of chronic diseases. So the biggest thing that was a shock to me, honestly, was when you cook meat, when you grill it, when you smoke it. All my friends love their smokers and all of these things, but
Yes.
anything smoked is not good for you, period. Let's be honest. But also it produces what's called HCAs and PAHs, which are these carcinogenic compounds. And they're formed when you cook meat at high temperatures. So we're exposing ourselves to these carcinogenic compounds, these AGEs, advanced glycogen end products. And they are found when you cook meat at high temperatures. The only safe way to cook meat without forming a lot of these AGEs or PAHs and HCAs is by boiling it. So if you want to boil, it's not going to cause that. But that surprised me. So number one, and even though obviously that deals with cancer, the other thing is that I couldn't deny the research on saturated fat. There's so much research on it. You can choose to ignore it, and that's fine, which is a lot of what the carnivores tend to do. They're like, oh, that doesn't matter. When you look at the research, the reason why it's so confusing is because you always have to ask yourself compared to what. So is a diet full of animal products, but not processed foods, is that going to be healthier? Yeah, than a diet that's the standard American diet to a diet that's full of animal products. That generally will be healthier because there are consequences to eating a lot of refined grains and a lot of sugar. But if you compare what's the best diet, because I didn't care about what's better. I wanted what was best for my family, what was best for my husband. I wanted to give him the best fighting chance. And there's nothing that compares to, and it doesn't even have to be perfect, but a whole food, plant-based diet where you can still eat meat sparingly. You can still have meat occasionally. It's not, you don't have to be a perfect vegan. In fact, I was listening to Dr. Greger the other day, and he said you don't really see the negative consequences of eating meat until you've had more than about 5 servings of meat within a month. So, so once a week, it's not going to hurt you. It really isn't. But when you're eating it for lunch and dinner every day in, day out, these small amounts of saturated fat adding to this over time, saturated fat is the number one thing that increases your LDL cholesterol. And LDL cholesterol, as much as the people are saying, does cholesterol matter? Yes or no? Yes, it does. My husband had elevated LDL cholesterol and it put him at a higher risk of stroke. And people will say, well, it's the sugar that causes that. Well, then you can talk to my dad, who he didn't have a big sweet tooth. He wasn't eating a ton of sugar. He was eating the animal products. He was eating all of these things. And that's what led to his higher LDL, which led to his, arteries being clogged. And so it's not just sugar. It can have an influence, but you cannot say it's black or white, this way or that way. These animal products, because of the saturated fat, do increase your LDL cholesterol, which increases the formation of plaque. And specifically ApoB, that was something that was also interesting to see. When you get your numbers checked, if you go into the doctor, look for your ApoB numbers. These are the type of numbers that influence plaque formation inside your arteries. And so knowing that is key. And some carnivores may be low. Maybe their ApoB is low. And I say, okay, that's fine, but you still are exposing yourself to these carcinogenic compounds. You still may be increasing your risk of cancer, because every time you cook or grill meat, it forms these HCAs and PAHs. So it's, no matter how you look at it, you can justify it. But if I want to be completely fair, looking at all of this research and all of the meta-analysis, it just shows that the more plants you're eating, the more health you get. That the more people are eating whole plant foods, they don't have to be perfect, but they're getting more antioxidants, they're getting more polyphenols, they're getting more nutrients that will help heal their body. And we needed the healing. And so I knew I needed to choose those foods. And so that's what surprised me, is that it's, we want to say that food is black or white and you have to be this way or you have to be that way. But I think there's a lot of room in the middle, as long as we're prioritizing plants, that we're getting at least those 5 fruits and veggies a day, that we're getting, green leafy vegetables, that we're getting those nutrients that our body needs.
And that's a great point, and for breaking that down, because I think people listening are like, okay, ApoB, blah, 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 like all these things, and people talk about particle size and the LDL, and you can go down the whole rabbit hole. But I think the general consensus that most people would agree is the elevated LDL, you just don't want to be there. So however you're getting that down, how about cooking methods? Because like you said, dark leafy greens and fruits, were there certain vegetables that you feel that people with kids that are trying to figure out, all right, maybe blackberries are a great fruit, but my kids aren't going to eat this. What foods did you see the family all responding to the best, that you could feel, okay, I can make this every week or for breakfast or lunch, and I'm not going to get much pushback from any of them?
And it was simple things, as simple as switching out my white rice for brown rice. I didn't get a lot of pushback from that. Although when my kids have white rice, they're like, what is this? This is so good.
Yeah, there you go, right?
And even my pasta. Now I do like a higher protein pasta that's more bean based. It has a mix of, I really like the Barilla, the like yellow box pasta. It has a mix of wheat and beans. So it has higher protein, but more plants in there. Those things your kids don't even notice, like the simplest type of swaps. And then every time I sit down to eat, and I still try to do this, is in the past, I'd be like, okay, we have, our meat and our starch and then our vegetable. And now I also add a fruit, because kids love fruit. So it's like, why not? It doesn't matter if it's a fruit or a vegetable. It's these same nutrients. It can be a red tomato or it can be a strawberry. They have similar nutrients in them. So if my kids won't eat tomatoes, they can eat strawberries. If they're eating the rainbow in any way, they're going to get the nutrients that they need. And so just putting more plants on the table. And it's amazing that when you do it, your sugar cravings go down. Like if you force yourself to eat fruit after every meal, if you're like, your meal is not complete until you've had an orange or a peach or an apple or a banana, it's amazing. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm not craving chocolate anymore. Like, who would have thought? Like, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's a good trade-off. And when it comes to cooking, like you mentioned with the proteins, grilling, boiling is the best method if you're going to do the meat. When it comes to veggies, is there any hard and fast rule about cooking?
They still obviously do form similar carcinogenic compounds, but it's like at a 1% compared to, 500%. Like it's a huge,
It's not even negligible. Yeah.
it's not even edible. Nothing smoked or grilled or charred is going to be healthy. You know what I mean? Even vegetables. So you still want to
Like
make sure that you don't overdo them. But
maybe like steaming the broccoli, would that be?
right. That's going to be the best way.
Okay.
My kids aren't going to eat it steamed, but they will eat
Oh,
it.
okay.
They
Okay.
will eat it if I grill it and if I put some salt on there. You have to flavor your veggies, and you can make broccoli taste like French fries. Like, you really can. They can be delicious. And so that's another thing too. You have to flavor your veggies. You don't want to eat boring vegetables. Like, it does take skill. It's just like when you're cooking meat, you're putting flavor on it. You're not just cooking, meat with salt every single night and just putting it on the table. That's really boring. And so it's the same thing with your veggies. You've got to add more flavor and mix it up. And one of the things that people give us a hard time about is how much tofu, I guess, or soy, just vegans in general are using. But I'm like, but look at the standard American diet. We use cheese and cream and dairy in everything,
Right.
It's like, it's hard to find a recipe without it. It's cream cheese, it's, whipped cream, it's whatever it is. And so I now just use cashews instead. That was an easy swap. So I'll just blend cashews with water for like a cashew cream, and I'll put that cashew cream in my soups to make my soups creamy. Or I'll even use tofu. Like, I have a tofu Alfredo. So instead of dairy, I'm taking tofu, I'm blending it in my blender with seasoning, with the spices. You have to make it taste good. Tofu tastes disgusting all by itself. You have to add the flavor, and then it's amazing. And so my kids absolutely love that meal. That's one they always ask for. It did require a skill set that I had to learn of, like, okay, I want to make lasagna. How do I do that? And I just simply Googled vegan lasagna. Even though I'm not vegan, I'm not 100%, but it's like, that it's not going to have animal products, and that I'll have everything in my house. I had to buy nutritional yeast because that's what a lot of people use instead of to get that cheesy flavor in a lot of recipes. And so once I had cashews and nutritional yeast, I had to buy like lentils. I'd never even cooked with lentils before in my life. I didn't even know what they were.
I love lentils. Yeah.
Right? They're
My wife.
amazing.
Yeah, my wife got me onto them, and I'm like, okay, you think, and you're like what we were talking earlier, like, what are the options you can present to the family? Because most people, they hear lentils are like, no, but now I'm like, all right, I get it.
Yeah. Well, in Indian food, like, there's so, like, Madras lentils, like, it's so yummy. There's so many delicious things. And I think this is the one thing that I want people to understand, is that you think you're going to sacrifice so much. Like, I'm going to eat less meat. That's such a huge sacrifice. But all of a sudden you enter into this world that you're like, whoa, there's so many more tastes and flavors. Food is so much more exciting. I'm not eating boring meat, and potatoes and a veggie every night. Now I'm eating Thai food. I'm eating Indian food. I'm eating like so many more varieties of tastes and flavors and spices. It's like, my husband always says, you were an okay cook, but you went plant-based and you became an amazing cook. Because I expanded my repertoire. I wasn't just doing the standard American easy broccoli cheese casserole.
Yeah, and I'm sure his labs are showing the benefits, right? Every time you go get him checked. And you had brought up salt. It made me think, because we are told a lot, salt is not good for the heart, and sodium and blah, 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 blah. What has your research shown you about the salt intake? Because I'm with you. You can't just steam broccoli. Most people are not going to be interested. But if you do add a little bit here, a little bit there of the salt, it does enhance the flavor.
Right. There's actually a lot of research that says potassium is really powerful at pulling excess sodium out of your bloodstream and into your urine. Potassium-rich foods are like avocados, spinach, the tomatoes even, and potatoes. Potatoes have a ton of potassium. But you can also buy light salt, Lite salt, and that has 50% potassium chloride. It tastes just like salt. You would have no idea. The only time I would not suggest using it is if you're making air pop popcorn, then it kind of tastes metally a little bit. But in every other dish, I bought a whole bunch on Amazon and I use potassium chloride light salt. And so that way I am using less salt, even though I can flavor it like I'm using 100% salt. And I went to a medical conference and there was study after study showed that if you just swap out your salt to light salt, that your blood pressure can go down, and it does make a big difference on your health. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good to know because I think people, again, that stigma that salt has behind it and everyone,
Yeah.
but this is something you said, you could just get it on Amazon and
Yeah.
kind of go from there. Okay.
And what kills me too, like my father-in-law is like, oh, but beans have so much salt in them, a can of beans. And I was like, but so does your chicken. You realize that that when you're buying chicken from the grocery store, it has been injected with salt water to make it bigger so that chicken breast can be sold for more money. And so you're
Right.
buying chicken that has way more salt on it than McDonald's French fries. So I know canned beans get a bad rap, and I like to make my beans from scratch when I can, but that's like
Okay.
level 2, right? At first, just
Yeah.
level 1 is open up your cans and don't be stressed about the salt. You will, when you're consuming a plant-based diet, you will be consuming less salt overall, and your blood pressure may go down mostly because you're eating more potassium-rich vegetables. And so when we did go plant-based, and I forgot to kind of follow up with that, after a couple months, my husband lost 20 pounds, his cholesterol went down, his blood pressure went down, and then after 5 months, he got his vision back, which was amazing. It was a miracle to us that he was able to get his vision back. So
That's a long time, man.
yeah,
5 months.
it was. It was a long time, but it's a huge testament that eating more plants can heal you if you really want to take your health seriously.
Yeah. Bringing you back to fiber, because I think that's another, nutrient that sometimes gets a bad rap. So, again, probably more from the carnivore side, and you don't need this, you don't need that. How did you, in your research, start to, this 90-10 plant-based framework you had, how does that sort of play into what you believe in and what's been working for you?
Right. Well, remember when we got that piece of paper from the dietitian and on it was like, eat more fiber.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a deep dive. Where do you find fiber? How much fiber do we need? Why is fiber important? Well, turns out 95% of Americans are not consuming enough fiber. We used to think that didn't really matter, but now there's tons of gut issues, increases in colon cancer, so many other things going on that the health of our gut affects the health of our brain and the health of our body. And a huge reason why is because we have our gut microbes. Now, we did not have the research to even understand the role that gut microbes played in our health until 2006. So it is all recent technology. We didn't even know how it all affected. We just thought that fiber gave, our stool some bulk to it and that it wasn't a big deal. But now we're seeing that when we eat fiber, our gut microbes produce what's called short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids are acetate, butyrate, propionate. And butyrate is talked about a lot because in the GLP-1 world, it plays a role in helping you feel full and satiated. It also helps to heal your gut lining, so protect you against leaky gut. But all of these short-chain fatty acids, all of them go throughout your body and reduce your risk of cancer, reduce your risk of heart disease, reduce your risk of diabetes, of all these diseases. That it's one of the best gifts you can give to your body is fiber. But sometimes when we overdo the fiber, we don't think that our body likes fiber because of the gas and bloating. So it definitely is very similar to like lifting weights at the gym. We know that strength training is good for our body, but sometimes when we go straight to the gym and we lift weights, we're feeling super sore, can't, squat down or sit up the next day, or it hurts so bad. And so does that mean you should stop? Does that mean weight training is not good for you? No, it means you need to train your body. And the more you do it, the less sore you get. And it's the same thing with eating fiber. The more fiber you eat, the more you build up the good gut microbes and the more easily you can handle it. And you won't get gassy and bloated when you're eating more plants. But even then, I think it's important to understand there are certain foods that are known to cause gas and bloating, but that doesn't mean they're bad for you. Like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, those cruciferous vegetables. They are your cancer-fighting vegetables. They are the ones that will fight cancer specifically. So you want to eat them, but you just need to make sure you're not overdoing it when you are. So about a quarter of your plate would be from these higher FODMAP foods. And then if more of your plate is filled with them, then you may, have more gas and bloating. So just be aware. And that's why I like to tell people, first prioritize leafy greens because leafy greens won't have that side effect as long as it's not kale or bok choy. Those are both cruciferous vegetables. But regular, like romaine lettuce, just something simple like that. Start with that. That's going to be easier for your gut to handle. And then you can slowly build up on other vegetables.
Are there fruits that you recommend for fiber in terms of like trying to avoid that bloating and
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to be more bloated from apples. You'll be more bloated from pears and from bananas. And so again, you can have one, but you'll notice if you had like 5 apples, you're probably going to fill it. You'll be more bloated from onions and garlic. So some of those things you may need to go easy. And then obviously from beans, which that's well known. The beans can just go easy on the beans at first, like go low and slow. But berries are generally pretty safe. Citrus vegetables are generally pretty safe. So you can have a lot of those and not have to worry about any of the side effects. So starting with like, okay, I'm going to add berries to my diet. I'm going to add a serving of leafy greens and then maybe half of an apple. And then you should be fine. And then just slowly kind of build it up from there.
I've read a study recently, I think pecans had some sort of like cholesterol lowering, some study they were doing. What is your overall take on nuts in general for how this incorporates into your diet, if at all?
Yeah, nuts are incredibly heart healthy. They're so heart healthy. It's funny, there's a lot of talk about seed oils and how seed oils are so bad, but a lot of these foods that have this linoleic acid in them are foods like nuts. And when you look at the research and you see people who are consuming more nuts are getting less heart attacks, are getting less strokes, are getting less cancer. And so nuts in particular, if you eat them in the whole form, but even eating peanut butter is still going to be good for you. But if you were just to eat a couple of nuts in their whole form, what happens is it's intact, right? It's more of that intact plant, which has the casing and everything, and it makes it all the way down to your lower digestive tract, and your gut microbes all the way down at the lowest part are thrilled. They're like, yes, finally there's food left for us, because most of the time we're eating these really processed breads or even nut butters, all these things that are so processed. They still may even be healthy, but they don't make it all the way down to the lower part of your colon. And those microbes deep down inside really need to be able to eat some of the foods that have the casings, right, that are more intact. And so it's even better for you. Like, for example, oatmeal versus oat groats. Like oat groats are going to make it all the way down to the very end, where oatmeal may not. It may be completely digested earlier on. And so you want to be able to feed all of the gut microbes in your entire system, right, in the whole digestive tract. And so having a mix of these whole plant foods where you're chewing them and then digesting them instead of, eating them blended up or anything like that.
How about other foods that might, aid in the lowering of the cholesterol and blood pressure, whether it's vegetables, fruits, whatever it might be that you're incorporating?
So again, Brazil nuts are fantastic because in particular, Brazil nuts are helpful for your thyroid, but also for lowering blood pressure. Flaxseed. So if you really want to lower your blood pressure, consume 1 tablespoon of flaxseed a day. Flaxseed in general helps to reduce your risk of all type of hormonal cancers. So any type of hormonal cancer, whether it's prostate cancer or breast cancer, flaxseed will help. And then berries, as we talked about before, any dark colored is going to help your brain. And so for my husband, when we're looking at like how can we help, his brain heal, these darker colored. In fact, now I tell my kids, if you have a test you're about to study for, then eat blueberries. Eat blueberries right before your test. That's really helpful. The beets and greens, and that's another thing I tell my kids. Like my daughter is on the rowing team at school. She does crew.
That's cool. I did it in high school too.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah.
So they had a regatta, and I was like, "Do you want me to tell you how to prep for it?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Hey, you need to beat dope." So you need beet doping is like really popular among athletes right now. So you take beets, cooked beets, you put them in your blender with water and you beet dope. You can do it with spinach though too. So you could just do a spinach smoothie before, but leafy greens, dark leafy greens and beets, if you consume them about 2 hours before your event, it's going to open up your arteries. And just like when you're driving on the freeway and there's traffic and then one extra lane opens up and then everything runs more smoothly and faster, that's what happens inside your body when you consume dark leafy greens and beets. And so eating that will help you be able to endure that athletic event so much longer. So that's super, super helpful. Again, beans, going back to beans, like they really are helpful. It's the fiber. You want to be able to, when you go to the bathroom, number 2, more often, you're producing bile. And in order to produce bile, your liver needs cholesterol as part of the building block. And so it's one of the reasons when you go more regularly. So if you're constipated, then you tend to have higher cholesterol. But if you're going more regularly, then it's requiring the cholesterol from your body to make the bile, and then you excrete it out. And also the fiber will help to just act like a scrub brush. That insoluble fiber will act like a scrub brush to scrub out any extra hormones, any excess cholesterol. And so that's really key in lowering all that. But the biggest thing for us, which was probably one of the harder things, is that we had to cut out a lot of the dairy that we were eating.
Yeah.
Not just what we were adding in, but cutting out a lot of that dairy that's high in saturated fat.
Because I was going to ask you that, especially with young kids, right? A lot of people are either doing, breast milk. Some families are doing formula. Some families are doing plant-based. How did you sort of address that when it came to, especially the young ones?
Right. So soy is the most equivalent to milk, especially for the young. When they were 1 and could have milk, instead of doing cow's milk, we did swap them to soy milk because it has more vitamins and proteins than an almond milk. So that's definitely much better for children. So to know that is key. But also, I still let my kids have Greek yogurt. Like, again, we're not 100%. I'm all about the 90-10.
Yeah, and I want to get into that so people understand what we sort of referenced a couple of times.
Yeah, so you don't have to be perfect. And I like non-fat Greek yogurt because the reason why, there's a couple reasons. I avoid dairy, I avoid butter for a huge reason. Like, butter is high in saturated fat. Butter, even if it's in your cookies, if it's in your brownies, whatever, it's going to increase your risk of developing these chronic diseases. Butter really has been linked to increasing your heart disease risk, increasing risk of stroke, things like that. So I use olive oil. So if I'm making popcorn, air pop popcorn, I'm going to use regular salt and olive oil instead of butter. So like that simple swap. I use the plant-based, more like olive oil based butter for toast. But yogurt is unique because it's a fermented food. So even though it's dairy, if you do a non-fat version, well, I don't have to worry about the saturated fat, which is what I'm avoiding in most dairy, like avoiding in reason why I don't eat butter. So it has the benefits of the fermented part because that's going to be really good for your gut. So I always try to look at food as like, okay, I know I'm plant-based, but there are benefits to some animal products. Like there are benefit to some fermented cheeses, fermented yogurt, and even eggs for kids, because if I'm not feeding them B12 or other vitamins, then eggs will have it. And adults may struggle more with eggs if they have high cholesterol, but kids usually it's a little bit easier for them. And so sometimes we'll have eggs. Sometimes fish every once in a while too. Like if we're going to have a special night or a special treat, it would be wild caught salmon or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Fish has been showed, if you're going to have some animal products, that is going to be the most heart healthy type of meat out there, and good for your brain as well.
Yeah, for sure, right? Like the blueberries. So can you break down how you approach this 90s method of eating?
Yeah. So a large part of, and I haven't brought this up, but a large part of the reason why we decided to not only go plant-based, but stay this way is because I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we have this health code where we don't drink alcohol, we don't drink coffee, and we follow what's called the Word of Wisdom. And in the Word of Wisdom, no one follows this part, but there's a verse that says to eat meat sparingly. Yes, the beasts of the land and the fowls of the air are for the use of man, but that they are to be used sparingly, and that it pleases the Lord that they should not be used except in times of winter or famine or excess hunger. No one follows that. And so when my husband didn't have his vision and we were stuck, and we, as most people do, when you go through a traumatic event, it's hard, and you turn to your higher power. You need extra help. And so as I was praying, I was like, okay, God, like I need help. What do we do? How do I help my husband heal? And it was like, you need to follow the Word of Wisdom completely, like all the way, not just the parts that most of us follow, but the whole thing. And it talks a lot about the herbs, eating more plants, and about eating meat more sparingly. And so because of that, I was like, I'm not an all or nothing person. And I love this approach that you don't have to be 100% vegan. Like veganism scared me because it's almost like a religion. It's an ethical belief. And if you don't eat like them, then they get mad at you, So I didn't want to be like that. And I'm just not an all or nothing person. And so I really love the idea of, if I go and visit my family and they served a, pot roast or some meal that I had growing up, that I can still eat it. And so that's a huge part of it too.
is it 90% of your weekly eating would be the plant-based, and then the other 10% could be the fish every once in a while, or,
So how I do it, I think the easiest way for me to handle it was the only animal products I'm buying are going to be sometimes eggs and Greek yogurt. But for the most part, what I cook at home is 100% plant-based. I don't have it in my house. Sometimes someone else will have cheese and it will be there. But when I'm not eating plant-based, usually it's social. It's social reason. We're out at a church event and they're serving. I'm like, that looks good. I want to have some, or I'm traveling and I'm stuck in between airports and at a layover, and the only thing that's open is Chick-fil-A, and the only thing they're serving is sandwiches because they don't serve salads for whatever reason. Like, then I'm gonna have that. Like, it's social reasons. It's when I'm out with other people. It's like some people are social drinkers. I'm like a social meat eater, and it makes it feel doable. So you don't feel uncomfortable in these social situations, and you can still enjoy it. But because I can control what I can control in my home, it makes it a lot easier.
Right. And you mentioned your Pilates background, and how, like, I think people, when they are concerned about going plant-based, they might think, well, the protein's what's giving me all the strength. And obviously Pilates I think of as like core strength. A lot of it is and that's sort of a strong core that you have. Did you feel any sort of a change or diminish return in your Pilates workouts as a result?
Not at all. No. In fact, I had more energy because I was eating more plants. It's not just protein, right? You need all of those antioxidants and nutrients to recover and to heal after you work out. But also, as you become more comfortable with eating more plants, then you start experimenting with things like tofu. And so it took like 6 months. So if someone's like, look, I don't think I could ever cook tofu, I was with you. I get you. I know what that's like. So it took a while. But then, now it's like, okay, I'll use more tofu. I'll use more tempeh. I'll make sure that we're getting a little bit more protein. So it's not just beans. And sometimes I even use the processed meats. Like sometimes I'll throw in more like TVP, which is textured vegetable protein. It's basically when you make canola oil, it's what's left over of the soybean. And so they extract the oil and then it's left over, and it's actually a defatted soy flour. It's super high in protein, but it's considered more processed because of that process. They've taken out the oil, but it's, I'll just add it to my rice, and it's like, okay, I have a lot more protein in that. Like I experimented more to create more higher protein meals that feel more satiating. But at first it was just like, okay, let's just have a smoothie for breakfast. Let's have a big salad for lunch. And then, just a plant-based meal for dinner. And now I'm like, okay, well, where's my protein source? And guess what? There's tons of plant-based protein. Even if tofu, tempeh, seitan, so many different options if I want a higher protein source. And sometimes I'll use protein powders too, like in my breakfast. I'll have oatmeal breakfast with some plant protein powder. So it's not that hard if you're just more cognizant of the protein. It's really easy to get to 100 grams of protein in a day if that's your goal. If you're trying to lift weights and, get more protein in, it's definitely doable. It's not scary and it's not too hard, as long as you're willing to have more of the processed types of protein.
Okay, so say someone's listening and they're like, wow, this does not seem as hard as I thought it was, but they don't want to just go like 90-10, right? What would be some ways to start small on like a daily basis for a family?
Yeah. So I always I hate it when I meet people and I tell them what I do. I'm like, I'm a plant-based nutritionist and I help people, and they're like, oh, we went vegan once and then we stopped. Like, why'd you stop? Why does it have to be all or nothing? Because even just switching out 3% of animal protein with plant protein a week, 3% in a week, okay? That's one meal. That is one meal. Even just doing that one thing, going meatless Mondays, that will reduce your risk of dying early from all causes by 12%. By 12%. So if you used to be vegan, bring back the one meatless meal a week, okay? Like, it can really make a big difference. And know that even these small changes do matter. So I would say start with your breakfast. It can be a really easy, simple swap. So personally, if you're just making more of a plant-based breakfast, and then do, one meatless dinner meal a week, I think everyone in the family will be okay if once a week they don't have meat. They'll be just fine. And then slowly start adding more, maybe make more plant-based lunches, and then slowly start making more plant-based dinners. And I always like to experiment with one new recipe a week, just one, try out one thing. Sometimes it's a winner, sometimes it's a loser, but that's how it was before I went plant-based. It's not like
Yeah.
every recipe
Yeah.
you try is amazing.
Yeah. And so they start 3%, and is it like every month? Do you double it? Like, or is it just kind of take it to what the tastes are of the family and what the reactions are?
Exactly. Take it with what's comfortable and doable for you. As you know, as a mom of six with things that are constantly going on, sometimes like I don't even know what I'm going to make for dinner tonight. It's like 4:30. I'm like, I haven't even thought about it. Like so
Right.
I get it. Like there may be a night that I was going to try something and now maybe it'll be a pizza night. Right? It's totally fine. So just make it work with your lifestyle, and know, and more than anything, know that the effort you put into this does matter, and it does help your family reach a healthier state. So it does make a difference. And I think that sometimes as a mom, when you're working hard on things and you're like, no one even ate my meal, to know like, no, keep trying, keep going. This does make a difference in your family's health. If you can change, even reduce that risk of mortality by 12%, every mom would do that. Every mom.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, like, if someone listening wanted to take one thing away, I mean, 12% sounds like a pretty key takeaway of like just one meal a week could do this too, right? And then you compound that with 6%, 12, right? And do the math. Is there one lesson to take away from that? If people, again, are hooked on the meat every meal, what do you think taking away from hearing you just drops so much incredible knowledge that they can go with and say, okay, if I'm going to start, here's my key takeaway?
I think it is a really confusing world to live in. If you want to get into nutrition and if you're wanting to learn more, you open up social media and you're like, I don't know where's the truth? I don't know. I should eat carnivore. I should eat plant-based. It's so stressful to really understand the truth. So I want to go back to this. Plants are good for you. I think most of us can agree. I know there's some carnivores out there trying to kill you. Plants are terrible. Well, that's because you get gas and bloating because you don't eat enough of them. But in general, I think most of society can agree that eating more fruits and vegetables is always a good step forward. If all you can do is when you're making dinner, just think, okay, can I add, besides just having a vegetable, can I add a fruit? If all you can do is just add, don't even take anything away yet. Can I add more beans? So say you have a bunch of ground beef for your tacos. Can I add a can of beans to this? Can I add in, what can you add in? Don't even stress about taking it out, because if you can add these things in, you're adding more nutrients, you're adding more, phytochemicals, you're adding more vitamins, you're adding more fiber. And 95% of us are not eating enough fiber. So just focus on that. Get enough fiber. Don't feel like you have to attach a label like I'm plant-based or I'm you don't even need a label. It doesn't matter. Just get sufficient fiber. That one thing will make a huge difference, and it will reduce your risk of so many diseases if you can just eat enough fiber. So add in a fruit and vegetable with every single meal if possible, and you'll feel the difference for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. Where can people learn more about you and how to just connect with you offline, learn about your services?
Yeah. So I have a really popular YouTube channel called Plantwise, PLANTWHYS. And I named it that way because I like to teach the why. Why would you eat more plants? Just like we talked about today, like why would you choose to do this? And so Plantwise, and I show, and again, I'm not vegan, but I have vegan recipes, because when you're transitioning, you're searching, okay, well, vegan lasagna, even if you're not vegan, you want to know, how can I make this more plant-based? And so on my YouTube channel, there's tons of easy recipes. That's what I'm all about, like the dump and go, easy casseroles, easy, crock pot or instant pot. Let's make this something that you can put in and then go to your kids' sports. Like I want to make this easy and approachable and that you can use with ingredients you already have in your pantry. Like it does not have to be complicated. It can be so simple. And then you can also follow me on Instagram. Same thing, Plantwise, PLANTWHYS. I'm on TikTok, but I just repost everything from Instagram, TikTok, so I don't even really look on there. But feel free to send me a direct message on Plantwise. And I want to give your listeners a free 30-day trial to my plant-based membership as well. If they do need more help and support, I would love to be able to help them, even if they cancel after 30 days, just to get that extra support and help to help them transition to more of a plant-forward lifestyle.
Wow, that's so nice of you. I appreciate that. But listen, this has been so nice talking to you, getting to know you, learning about your story. It's very inspirational because I think a lot of people hopefully don't have to go through what you went through with your father and your husband subsequently. But listening to you should light that fire under them to make sure that they aren't in your place, but that there are resources out there to sort of be preventive about it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Very nice talking with you. Plant-wise, YouTube and Instagram. Again, thank you so much, Allie. Great to talk with you. And let's stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.